Hello, and welcome once again to Family Historian. My name is Stephen Conte. The most common genealogy sources can be found in your very own home, and they have a very fancy name, ephemera. And that will be tonight's topic. We are going to learn how to use genealogy ephemera. And joining me on tonight's show, I am very honored to have as my guest a wonderful, very knowledgeable genealogist. Her name is Catherine Casey Zahn. She has been on my show 3 times before because she is so smart. And this show tonight was her idea. And now let's get ephemerized with Catherine Casey Zahn. Casey, welcome back to my show.
Thank you for having me back, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know you like being called Casey, so we'll call you Casey.
Okay.
Now, before I go any further, Casey, what is the best definition of ephemera? My viewers are dying to find out.
Well, ephemera is a collection of things to be enjoyed for a short period of time, usually paper, things that people might have, like a birthday card or something that they received a letter from somebody that could help them kind of create that memory that they've had for a long time.
And these go way back.
Yes, they can go way back. Think of the Constitution. The Constitution's been around for over 200 years, and that's a piece of ephemera.
Right. But the ephemera that we have right here, my stuff and your stuff, are things that we found in our own home or in the homes of others.
Exactly.
And we're going to show you some examples of these very interesting examples of ephemera. And the first one I did my homework.
Okay.
Back in the 1940s, my father was in the service, and I found a page of his diary.
That is awesome.
And he mentions he's at Fort Dix in New Jersey here in 1941. And then he went out to Buckley Field in Colorado, where he caught rheumatic fever. He was in the hospital for many days and then wound up in Richmond, Virginia.
Neat, neat.
And all of this is date by date, day by day, his diary.
And it's a great piece of information for your family history because it can help you build a timeline for your father's life.
Right, right. So this is my piece of ephemera, and I have to guard this with my life. Another example of ephemera, I found a birth certificate, but not a civil one.
Right.
My mother was baptized in a baby's hospital. She had pneumonia as a small child, as a baby, and unfortunately her sister, her twin sister, died. Oh. In those days, we did not have all the medical miracles that we have now.
Right.
So she was baptized in the baby's hospital, and I have an example of it right here.
That is awesome. That is just a cool piece of material that you can now build your mom's timeline with, including the information about how she was a twin, as well as the unusual sense of the document as well.
Yes. So I never saw this before, a hospital document.
No, that's really cool.
Then I found, you mentioned postcards.
Yes, we'll get to that.
Yes, I found this very comical one. This is from 1944. A young man was in the service and basic training, and he was exercising here, and he sent this to his mom, and he said, "Mom, if you exercise like this, you won't be as fat as you are now."
If I was his mom, I'd smack him in the head for that one.
Right. And the last piece I have, this is all my ephemera now. You said obituary cards.
Exactly, obituary cards. And sometimes, depending on the time period, obituary cards can go from something like a simple memorial card like this to some very elaborate ones that people have used in the past as well.
And this one, you do get a photo.
Yes, some people
do that. Of the deceased. And this is a cousin of mine in Italy who died. He was born in 1911, and they sent me this from Europe with his photo on it. So that's a very good piece of family ephemera.
It is.
Now let's get to your stuff.
Okay,
because I know you have a bevy. You could paper a wall with this ephemera, right?
Let me tell you, I started off when I did my family history with nothing, and what I've accumulated over 30 years is amazing. It's astounding. But basically, as I mentioned, from home, I have like birthday cards from when I was first born that my mom kept for me, that, Valentine's Day and so forth,
Right.
that we've kept at home. And then I had my dad's business card, which, is something that means something to me because my father's no longer here.
Yes.
And then, of course, the memorial cards, these wonderful memorial cards that people get from,
Right.
that people get at funerals. And
Yes.
they're all a collection of family history that people can use in their research.
And as I said, some of those memorial cards will have a photo of the deceased.
Sometimes they will.
And others will not.
Correct.
I see.
And sometimes they come with like a black border around them. They're very elaborate and
Yes.
very kind of cool to look at when you
So
see
you
it.
really have to go digging. I
You
mean,
do.
All
You
of
do.
this genealogy is right under your own nose.
Exactly.
It's not fancy research. I
No.
mean, it's a home source, but with a very fancy name, Ephemera.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So stuff to build your family history with. A lot of people, don't really think about the things that they have at home. And whenever I'm teaching a class, I always tell people start at home because there's so much that you have at home that you don't even realize
Right.
that you have.
Right, and then interview older relatives. The same old story.
Exactly,
Right.
same old story. For example, like after I had, collected all the things that I had in my house, then my next step was to visit family members. And visiting family members, including my in-laws, I got a wonderful document of my mother-in-law's side of the family, her
Yeah.
Welsh side and her Swiss side,
Yeah.
including the card that shows the location of where her grandfather was from in
Wow.
Switzerland. And then
That's a genealogical gold
oh,
mine
it is,
right
and
there.
especially right here with the newspaper clipping of her
Yes.
uncle that's in the newspaper. That's
Right.
just
And
fabulous
this you
to have.
obtained by going
Through visiting my mother-in-law.
Okay.
Okay. Now visiting family members like my cousin was going to throw this out, and I asked her not to because this is a little checkbook receipt book from my grandfather's last days of his life, my great-grandfather's.
Yes.
So it was kind of like a snapshot of his lifetime from
Right.
1941 until his death in July of that year.
Right,
And even
right.
afterwards when the probate came into court.
Yes.
So that was something that we had as well.
Right.
Something else that we found it belonged to my grandfather was this wonderful document that dates back to the 1790s, and it's on my family that we had never seen before. And we pulled it out. It was like, whoa, look at this! And it put our family tree back to the 1700s, late 1700s.
And this you got by
Just
interviewing relatives?
talking to relatives and so forth.
Yeah, yeah.
My next piece of great information was from two cousins of my grandfather.
Yeah.
The first was Mrs. Hull, and she was a teacher in my high school in Connecticut. And I still call her Mrs. Hull, even though she's a relative. But Mrs. Hull was a teacher at my high school, and she retired the year that I went to freshman year in high school. One of the things that my grandfather's cousin did was to sit down and interview her, and I have this wonderful collection of notes from her talk about family situations, some really hilarious things that happened.
Yeah.
Well, that was nice because that led me to another cousin who had, and this is a collection of old letters that she had that went back to 1850.
Yeah,
And what was
yeah.
nice about this is that she had information from a family Bible as well as an obituary, but letters from people to her grandmother. One from an aunt that lived in the 1850s. Another one from my third great grandmother.
Now, Casey, when you visit these relatives, are they receptive? Do they know they have these things?
They do. In fact, Mrs. Hull was the one who gave me a wonderful picture of this man right here, who we didn't know who this was
Yeah.
for the longest time. But she goes, "Oh, you can have this," and she gave me this picture of him. And as a result of meeting her and meeting this other cousin, same side of the family, I was able to determine the family history and the folklore of him, who ended up being my second great grandfather, Roswell Wilkinson, and then finding they gave me some letters.
Yes.
The one cousin gave me letters from his sister to their grandmother.
Right.
And so she gave them to me because my maiden name is Wilkinson, and she goes, "Why don't you keep that?" And these letters were written by Edna Wilkinson Hapgood up in Massachusetts to her, like I said, to her grandmother. And the really interesting things, it talks about her daily life from like 1860s through 1895. Wonderful stories.
So you really get some insight.
You do.
And I was asking about, are these cousins receptive? And I should know that I did tell you about my recent experience, which was an astounding genealogical find. I recently had my DNA results coming in. And not only do they tell you where you are from in the world, but they connect you with your DNA matches, cousins by the dozens. And I connected with a lovely lady up in Buffalo, New York. And we figured out that we were third cousins. I sent her some photographs that I had of my great-grandfather as an older man. It turned out that her great-grandpa and my great-grandpa were brothers, and she had a younger picture of him from the 1890s.
That is just awesome.
Emailed it to me. It's on the set tonight, right over here. And it was so haunting. It was, you know, I felt all the DNA exploding in me. It was wonderful, you know. And she was very receptive. And you know, Casey, I always tell people, when you meet one distant cousin, the rest come out of the woodwork.
They do. They do. And what was great about the letters that I received from this one cousin is that I had Edna's letters, and I promised her that if I ever meet a descendant of Edna's, that I would give them to her. Well, wouldn't you know it, about 10 years ago, I met Edna's probably fourth great-granddaughter. I sent her the letters. She sent me back this picture of Edna.
Oh, my word.
So once I have the pictures side by side, you can actually see that they are definitely brother and sister. And it was just a nice way to bring things full circle.
So she's a great-great-great-aunt of yours?
She's two great aunts.
Right, right.
It would be my great-grandfather's aunt.
So, you know, if you have genealogy material in your home, share it.
Right.
I mean, there might be only one person in the family who's the genealogist, as I am and as you are. You know, we will gather these things. And we'll get back to this in a moment. But you said something very important. When you find all of this ephemera, and there are 3 things that you should do to preserve it. Can you tell our viewers?
Sure. They should scan it.
Scan.
They should cite the sources. And they should use it.
And preserve it.
And preserve it, right. And preserve it as well. The reason why is because this is stuff that I have. But if you look at this paper that I showed you earlier, you can see that it's frail. It's not made of the same compositive materials that today's paper is made of. So paper tends to fade over time. I recommend to people that they scan it and use the scan copy when they're doing genealogy work or they're sharing it with other people. And then keep them in these archival sleeves.
Are they acid-free?
They're acid-free. You can get them at any office supply store, and they come in boxes. You can order them online. They have larger ones for larger documents. But just to preserve it in those documents, so that way future generations can enjoy them as well.
And you have scanned all of these?
Quite a bit. A lot of the things that I have here today I've scanned.
Now, when you say cite the sources, where it came from?
Exactly.
And who it is, of course, if it's a photo.
Right. For example, this picture of Aunt Edna, I would say that I received this picture from my cousin Amy, and the year that she sent it to me, and, you know, given to me because of, you know, and tell the circumstances of how I received it. Because sometimes those little tidbits of the circumstances can lead people in other directions when they're doing their family research. That little bit of information ultimately led to a document in a newspaper of all things, where Edna was writing, had written to Roswell, and one of the things that showed up in a newspaper article was Edna's letter to her brother, and it helped me identify that yes, Roswell and Edna were truly brother and sister. All I had was like the circumstantial evidence, but the fact that he had a letter from his sister. And that ultimately led me to the Newark Evening News.
Newspapers, the best example of ephemera.
And this is from 1989, but you can see it's a full-page article about that little rascal Roswell and his life and how he met an untimely death right here in New Jersey. So
we won't go into that.
No, but I mean, it's a great story, and you know, and it's a series of these articles that helped me learn a little bit more about his life, because we had just assumed that he was in Connecticut, and ended up he was dead and buried here in New Jersey. So, you know, it just kind of adds that flavor to the family tree and
Mystery
the family
solved.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
And what other things did you get from relatives, or is that it for now?
That's it for right now, but if you want, we can talk about some other things. If you don't have relatives around, that, you know, what you can look for.
Okay, you put down online sources.
Exactly. There's some online sources.
The high-tech ephemera now.
Yes, the
Okay.
high-tech ephemera. This is something I printed out of my family. It's a letter from my third great uncle to the letter to Congress, asking for his sons to be recognized as American citizens. And I found that by using Google Books.
Okay.
There are other sites like the Hathi Trust, which is another book, things that might have family genealogies or
Right.
family information for people to use as well. I recommend people to hit flea markets and yard sales, because even if you don't have something that belonged to your family, you still might be lucky enough to find a postcard like this one's from
Right.
Patterson. And I had another third great grandfather that died here in Patterson that I didn't know when I first started. I just thought everybody was from New England, and
Right.
they didn't. They spread out from New England. So I was able to get a postcard of but the local area, kind of get a feel of what it
Yeah.
looked like maybe in the time that they lived.
Like, I never knew I had relatives in Buffalo, New York.
Yeah, now you can shuffle off to Buffalo.
Right.
There you go.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. But that cousin up there was so giving, you
Right.
know, and I spoke to her on the phone, and it's wonderful when you can share genealogy.
It really is.
You know,
It really is.
I do have some other cousins who shall remain nameless, you know, and I don't want to bother them, but I know they have information. I
Right.
know they have Bible records. I know they have photographs that are lying in a shoebox, and I could really restore them. I would pay for the whole thing, you know. So if you're out there watching, send them to me. I'll scan them, I'll preserve them, and I'll cite my sources.
There you go.
And I'll even name your name on television.
There you go. Another thing you can use is today's technology is so advanced that you can actually take a tablet like an iPad and take like this postcard and, you know, photograph it
Right.
front and back, and the picture and the quality is just phenomenal. Like,
Right.
you know, compared to even 10 years ago when I scanned a lot of things.
Yes.
I've noticed that a lot of my information is getting pixelated, which has like little boxes and so forth. But by using newer technology and rescanning them, it's just, the quality is just beautiful. It's like looking at the real thing.
Right. Do you have any
fascinating.
more visuals to show us here?
I do.
Sure. I think I see 5 beautiful
Yes,
girls.
5 beautiful
okay?
girls, because in the collection that I have, speaking of postcards, my grandmother had this wonderful picture, and she was fascinated by the Dion quintuplets.
Yes,
And
yes.
everybody was. That was the big craze back in the early 1930s.
They were born in 1934.
Right.
And I think 3 of them are still living in Montreal.
Probably,
Right,
yes, I
right.
think you're right.
Yes.
But that was the same year that my Aunt Elaine was born. And so my grandmother was fascinated by that because she's given birth the same time that these girls were given birth. So she collect ephemera from that time period, including this wonderful postcard that shows the basket that they used for the babies when they were first born
Yes.
from Canada.
Yes.
So that was kind of cool to see that in that collection as well.
They were born at a time when the fertility pill was not around.
Exactly.
So this is the real
This is the real deal.
deal, and I believe they were identical, which
They
is
were.
which is like 1 in 10 million, I think.
Exactly.
Right, right. So tell our viewers again how they can hunt for this ephemera and look for it, and you know what clues they can get from it, and what is a genealogy ephemera? What constitutes a genealogy ephemera?
Well, fortunately for a lot of genealogists, you have historical societies and archives and state libraries that preserve this material today for us. In fact, I've seen a replica copy of an ancestor's diary from the 1700s from Eastern Connecticut that's available online through the Connecticut State Library. I've seen, as I mentioned, the online books. You can find the congressional records. One of the books that I found was a story about my 4th great grandfather, who was a sea captain right out of here, out of New York, and he was involved with the French spoliation case. So we don't realize that a lot of our relatives and ancestors had day-to-day communication with historic events.
Yes,
And it
yes.
and sometimes it's that historic event. Maybe it's an eyewitness account or so forth that could lead you to that information. If you can't find it at a state archives or a historical society, try museums. I found some wonderful pieces of ephemera for another family member out of Philadelphia that showed his business. It was a placard of his business card, and that was from a museum in Delaware.
Right.
So you just never know where it's going to show up.
But how, Casey, my question to you was, how did you know to go to that source, though?
Sometimes when you're doing your research, there's just clues. For example, if you're researching somebody who's got a trade, like a silversmith or a shoemaker, you can actually do a Google search now in today's technology and look for sources that will lead you to other locations. Some of my family members were mill workers. So by doing a Google search of the mill, I can actually find out the owners of the mill. And sometimes some of these mills had newspapers that can lead you to other locations and sources.
I know Patterson had the
silk mills.
The silk mills.
Lots and lots of them.
Did you have any French ancestors there? Because I know there was a French community there that worked
not
in the
that
silk.
I know of at this time.
Yet.
I always say not that I know of at this time, because
Right.
I've been pleasantly surprised over the years to see how many of my family members ended up in New Jersey. So I do have Jersey roots, not realizing that everybody's not always from New England. And it was just a fun way of, finding out more information, and it got me to appreciate other localities and their history and what made into that, what went into that community to make it a community.
Right. Now you are a very creative person.
Thank
very
you.
artistic, very talented, very knowledgeable. That's why it's her 4th time here tonight. I haven't exhausted her talents yet. You do something very unique with ephemera.
I do.
Can you share that and show us?
I will.
Show our viewers that. This is very unique.
I have one piece here, and I think I left the other one out in the other room, but every year at Christmas time, I find something that's unique about the family, and I create a Christmas card.
Wonderful.
So this is the Christmas card that I just gave this past year. It's my ancestor's home in Connecticut that he built, and you can actually see the date on the top. But what was cool is we took the picture and made like a pen and ink sketch with it, and made it into a Christmas card with a little bit of details.
Wonderful.
In there.
May I see this?
Sure can.
Yeah. And you send this to your relatives?
I send it to everybody, basically my friends. Everybody looks forward to it, from what I understand. They see what little piece of genealogical information.
And this is your ancestral homestead?
My 3rd great-grandfather's homestead
in
Connecticut, Waterford, Connecticut.
I keep forgetting you're a nutmegger.
Yes, I am a nutmegger. We did a show on that, remember?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And Rhode Island also.
Rhode Island also,
right.
And then another thing that I did a few years back when my in-laws celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, we made little miniature albums, and just a little bit about each little part of their life, and I end it with a little picture at the end.
And that is?
That's my in-laws' 50th, when they got married in 1950.
You do a lot for your in-laws.
I do. I do a lot for my family. I love my family, both sides.
Right.
In-laws or not, I love everybody.
All right. I just want to stress to my viewers, when they find this ephemera, and the 3 magic words are?
Cite
your sources.
Cite your sources, scan it. And preserve it. And most of all, have fun with it, because you got to have fun with the information, because I find that if by doing something creative like this, that I get kids of all ages interested in it, as well as adults. They want to see more of what's going on in the family history, and they start asking questions. And that's what we need to do as genealogists.
Right.
Keep
and
them
also,
asking questions.
would you recommend the DNA to find these cousins?
I
because
would.
I found you would.
I would, because it's another tool of technology that's really wonderful for genealogists to use and to discover.
Yeah.
So lots of fun things with DNA that I'm looking forward to doing it and seeing what I explore from that.
Well, I got my results recently, and it was astounding. And I've made friends and relations with cousins, and it's just amazing.
It really is. It's amazing that, just to think a swab of your cheek or a little bit of spit can tell you who you're related to.
You've got the whole history
exactly
of the world in your mouth.
Exactly.
And there's really nothing new about you. You have been here for thousands of years.
Right. I think it's fun to see, like you think about, after a certain point, your tree collapses because you have family members who have married family members.
Right.
And you think about, if you go back with the numbers, every generation you multiply it by 2, 4, and so forth. But if you do it reverse, that within 1,000 years, everybody's related to everybody.
Well, I was told, Casey, that we are really 50th cousins to each other.
And if you're Irish...
All of us are 50th cousins to each other, but the world is still upset.
Exactly. And if
Right.
you're Irish, you're 12th cousins. There's a mathematician that recently did that, and he said, everybody who's basically from Ireland, they're about 12th cousins at the most.
Right.
Which is kind of fascinating.
Right. Well, listen, this has been wonderful having you here.
Thank you, Stephen.
The 4th time.
I can't believe that.
Okay, you did 3 other wonderful
Thank
shows
you.
with me, and I'm going to have you back, but you have to think of something else now, okay?
I will.
And I want to thank you people out there for watching my very colorful and visual show on genealogy ephemera. And on that note, as I have been saying for the last 29 years, remember, we are all descendants of ancient civilizations. Genealogy is your key to the history of your family. And so until next time, this is Stephen Conte wishing you the very best of luck in your research, and above all, happy ancestor hunting. Good night.